past that was such a big top secret deal that he couldn't talk about it now. I didn't understand that, particularly for someone that was not like a command officer or something. He was a flight surgeon. What would a doctor in the military have that was so secretive that he couldn't talk about it years later? And on this next time we got together, when he drove up to where I was and walked in, I saw a total, complete countenance change on him. When he came in, I saw the colonel. He came walking in like a military man. And when he sat down, he said, "We need to talk." I said, "Yes, sir." It went through my head. He's back in the military. Maybe he's going to relate this subject to me that happened to him. The next few minutes, he talked about top secret type things, that when you give an oath in the military, you can't divulge things. And I said, "These many years later, were these combat things?" And he said, "No, sir, I told you before it wasn't combat." But this kind of gut-wrenching problem that affects someone sure looks like death to me. And this look came over his face, and he said, "Yeah, it had to do with death." "Death of men under your command?" "No, but death." "But what could it be?" And then he broke down. He said, "If I told you something, would you absolutely give me your word that you would never tell a living soul on earth?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And he goes, "You couldn't tell your wife." "Okay, I won't tell my wife. You'll have to absolutely swear to me. I mean, you're a religious man. Will you swear on God's name?" I said, "I can't do that because it's against my religious beliefs." And then this look came over and he said, "I understand that." When I was in the military, he said, I was a doctor. I was in charge of a wing in SAC. All the military records and making sure the pilots were tested out about fatigue and all their problems about medical conditions. And I said, "Then you say you're a flight surgeon. Were you a surgeon?" He said, No, I'm a doctor, but I was more an administrative officer of doctors under me and all the records and everything." And I said, "Does this thing have to do with your job as a flight surgeon?" And he said, "Very much so." He said one night he got a call from the base at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And he was told he had to get to the base real soon. And he told the person on the phone that he would be there in about 2 hours. And a general came on the line. And a general, he didn't know who it was. And he was given a direct order to be at the base in 45 minutes. And so he had to scramble, and he realized he couldn't go casual, and he put on his uniform and jumped in his car. And then when he got there, another anomalous thing happened. Normally he would just go through and just drive onto the base through the checkpoint, and he had a sticker on his car, and of course the people at the guard post would know who he was. And there was a vehicle waiting for him, and he was told to follow it, and he was escorted onto the base. He wondered, are we in an alert, or has there been a plane crash, or what's going on? Because this had never happened to him before, he said.
And what year do you think this was?
Later, that very subject came up. He did not say the exact year, but he said in the very late 1940s. And I realized that one of the things he was doing here was trying to figure out how to regain his faith. That he admired the fact that I was a grown man and that I had religious beliefs, and it showed. So anyway, instead of going to the big administrative end of the base, which was the only place he ever worked, they went clear across the base to another area, to a series of buildings that he had never even been in. He was ushered inside by military police with an escort, and he went, "What is this?" And he began to have fear, because that was back in the era of the Cold War, that perhaps something wrong had happened in the world, and perhaps we were in some kind of alert. And when he went inside, he was met by a general that he had never met before. He didn't give me any names. He was taken into a side room, and when he went in the room, the general closed the door and said, "Sit down." He sat down at a table. The general sat down across from him. He was expecting an explanation of what this was all about, and instead of an explanation, the general slid a piece of paper across the table at him and said, "Read that." And he looked at it, and it was a kind of form he had never seen before. And it had to do with security, and it was about a level of security clearance he had never heard of before. And he turned it over, and he said, "What do you want me to do with this?" And he said, "I want you to sign it." And he signed the thing. He said, "Why did I have to sign this?" And he said, "Because you're just about to enter into another level of military experience that you're not familiar with, and a certain level of keeping secrets that requires this level, and I have to warn you about something." What followed was threats. All his time in the military, he had always been treated with the most respect, and the fact that he was a colonel, he was really put off sign a special high-level top-secret form, and then he's being told that what you see here, what you hear here, you can't ever take off this base. And you can't ever talk about it to anybody unless you're addressed by your superiors. And that what you're about to go through, you have to only talk about with your superiors and with no other members of the military, nobody below you, nobody in the medical end of all the people that he dealt with on a daily basis. He couldn't discuss it with them. He could only discuss it when it was brought up by his superiors, and he could never take it off base. He couldn't talk to his priest. He couldn't talk to his wife. He couldn't talk to anybody about it. And that if he ever was found out that he discussed what was about to happen with anybody, it could end up destroying his military career and could even end up in court-martial. And before he could say anything or ask any questions, he said they immediately were walking up a hall. And his head was swimming by all this. What can this possibly be, that I'm having to enter into a whole new world here of relationship with the military? And before he could get an answer, somebody walked up to him, handed him a clipboard, and on it was a notepad, and they handed him a mask. And he said, "What's this for?" And he said, "Just put it on." And when he walked around the corner, there were two more generals. One that he knew from the base, and another general he did not know. And now he was really terrified, because he's in the presence of three command structure generals. It never happened in his life that he was in that kind of position. And before he could ask any questions, he was walking up a hall towards a door, and there was a window in the wall that you could look into the next room. And inside, there was like lights set up, and he saw a photographer. Again, he thought through his mind a crash, because they were taking pictures inside, and it just went through his mind, they've got bodies here. And the door opened, and he was told to walk in. And when he got inside, he just froze. And he said his whole world turned upside down by what he saw when he went through the door.
And in this next half hour, George, we will hear in great detail. It's the first time I have felt like perhaps through this flight surgeon and Ronnie Secoy that I am seeing what actually happened in at least one of the autopsies of an extraterrestrial biological entity creature at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in sometime from 1947 onward. And there will be much to talk about as we keep evolving this story through the next 2 to 3 hours. And as we come to the end of each audio, George, I'll have some information update, and you can ask questions. But in this next segment, this is where this flight surgeon is ordered by these three generals to observe the autopsy of something that there's no words, no explanation. Imagine this, being yanked out of bed, a colonel at Wright-Patterson, three generals tell you, take a notebook, take a pad, write down what you see. And that is what happened to this man.
Linda, this has got to be one of the most riveting stories I have ever heard.
Oh, I thought so, too. And wait till you hear how it continues to unfold.
And you picked this up during one of your appearances on Coast to Coast? Somebody called here?
Well, it's hard to know whether it's Earth Files, Coast, Dreamland, because I started in December and January putting out that appeal on Coast and at Earth Files and at Dreamland, asking if people had firsthand experiences. And I have now over 200 really substantive emails. The problem is the vast majority say, I cannot. I will not go on the record, but I want you to have this information.
Yeah, they're still scared. All right, stay with us, Linda. I'm looking forward to the next segment. I'm George Norrie, back in a moment. Like Linda said, 2 hours of this, and then the last hour we're opening up the phone lines, you and Linda Moulton Howe. And welcome back to Coast. I'm George Norrie with Linda Moulton Howe with now part 2 of 4 parts on this very remarkable story. And I got to tell you again, Linda, even the guys in the studio just were glued to the speakers during that last interview segment.
Right, and that's how I felt on the telephone. And right now, where we left off is that he has these three generals. They are taking him down a hallway